done detailed soil sampling on these. We've collected over 11,000 soil samples, so it's been a substantial program, and the purpose of this is to see the soils. What you get in the soils will tell you the possibility of what could be in the bedrock underlying these areas. And the Coxwell-Lacan Norte grid, we've found results up to 4,600 ppm copper, which is, 0.4% in soils. That's almost economic right there. So that suggests there's a good bedrock source. On the Coxwell-Lacan grid itself, we have high gold, up to 2 grams, 2,000 ppb in soils. And again, that could be economic in some situations, right in the soils. It's amazing. So that, to us, suggests there's really good potential in the bedrock there. And there is also good copper with that. So these two areas are underlain by this tertiary intrusive, this granitic rock, which, as I've mentioned, is similar to what Goldcorp is producing gold from to the north of us. It is analogous with a porphyry gold copper type situation. So I think that's really quite an interesting target. The other area of interest is the Metzicaltepec grid, where we're getting silver in soils up to 60 ppm, which is almost a couple of ounces, and lead up to 32,600 ppm, which again, I mean, that's phenomenal. I haven't seen values this high in a long time. It's 3%. And on the San Isidro grid, again, high silver, high zinc, high lead. The Pedro Eman grid, we're getting reasonable copper and silver, not quite as high as the other grids. But I like this grid because the geology is very favorable. We're finding volcanic rocks that have a VMS character. So I think is good potential here, despite the fact that some may argue that geochemistry isn't quite as high as these other areas. But I think if you look at some of the other areas, you'll see in the San Isidro grid, the anomalies are on carbonate. So it's a different type of an animal we're looking at there. It's more of a chimney and mantle style deposit. This shows some of the countryside. The village of Coxwell-Lacan. It's situated in a nice valley. It's really nice country to work in. This is the rock that we see at the Coxwell-Lacan area. It's a granitic rock and it's shattered. It's got lots of little fractures in it and they're limonitic. They probably had sulfides at one time. We've found some fresher rock that does have disseminated sulfides, and that's what we believe hosts the gold, as well as copper. Here's some of our crew. Some of them are local people that we've hired, and then we have technicians that we've brought in from Mazatlan that work with us. And they're sampling some of the outcrops, and you can see that we have good road access there. So it's a really good area, I think, to develop a mine. Again, in summary, some of the high values that we've got on that grid, up to 2 grams, that's equivalent to 2 grams in the soil and gold, and almost 0.38% copper in soil. So it's a porphyry copper target, which is essentially a bulk mineable situation. Here is the grid in detail. All these little lines of dots are the actual sample sites. In red, you've got the tertiary intrusive, and then in yellow are the areas of the gold anomaly, and that's the copper anomaly. It's contoured in copper over 210 ppb. But again, remember, there are areas in there that are up to 0.38%, which is 3,800 ppm. So it's quite an interesting area. And this area, as you remember, there is the grid to the north, which also has high copper, and they could be linked up. So we have to do more work to sample in these areas to see whether there is continuity of mineralization. You can see on the bottom here we haven't taken any samples. This anomaly comes to an abrupt end, so it hasn't been adequately closed off. So we need to do more sampling in that area, and that'll be part of the ongoing program. This shows the Coxwell-Lacan Norte grid. The copper anomaly is in a colored contoured pattern. The red is the high copper zone. And it's sort of an annular shape, this circular feature. It looks like a donut in some respects with the high copper around here. And that's often very typical of a porphyry copper where you have an intrusive and the mineralization forming around it in that donut-shaped pattern. And in fact, you have zones of very high copper, up to 1400 ppm, so that's quite exciting. You can go to those areas and find actual oxide copper in the soils. The next area that we sampled in detail was the Metzicaltepec grid. You have an anomalous zone here, which is 7.5 kilometers long. And again, this high red area is the high silver. And it's sort of a narrow band, and that reflects some of the mineralization that we've found in place. We've sampled some of the old showings. These are the numbers here are silver in grams per ton that we've got off of these showings, and they're quite impressive. 600 grams per ton, 468, very good. But it is a type of deposit I believe is probably an epithermal vein. You've got silver, lead, zinc hosted in a barite gang. There is some areas down on the bottom here that have potential for VMS mineralization. There could also be SEDEX potential, which is a sedimentary exhalative type of massive sulfide deposit. So we'll investigate these ideas on the ongoing exploration work. This shows some of the countryside. Again, it's quite interesting, the forest. You have up in the high mountains oak and pine forest. The locals have planted some corn in some areas. And this shows the dump at the La Fortuna mine. It's again, it's one of these barite lead zinc deposits. This shows some of the ore that you'll find there. Up in here is this bladed tabular barite crystals and the dark zinc mineralization in the white barite gang. This is a high silver mineralization. In fact, a preliminary analysis with a Niton machine that we had on site said it was over 11 kilograms silver per ton, which is phenomenal. Anyways, we'll get a proper assay to confirm that number, but it's high in silver, and it's a sulfide-type rock. It's probably arsenopyrite, galena, and stibnite. Okay, the San Isidro grid, this is a grid that's further south on the VLN2 property. Again, here in the red is the high silver zone. It's quite a broad anomaly, and it needs to be closed off in the middle. We haven't taken samples there, so that'll happen shortly. There's also up in this area a showing called El Carrizal, which is not actually on our property. It's just on this road that comes up here. But if you look at it, that's what it looks like in this creek. These outcroppings, these exposures,